lost hours to the road. It was the new normal. After a few days, they would get in the truck and drive, sacrificing a third or more of their day just to be sure they had enough distance behind them to be out of the storm's immediate reach. Or their best approximation of it, anyway, since there wasn't exactly a handbook that told them how big of an area acted as a single target. Chloe gripped the wheel with one hand, her eyes looking forward but not particularly taking anything in but, we're still on the road. She might even admit that at first, the thought of driving without a destination in mind was appealing. But that dissolved quickly. She hated those long stretches of nothing but movement. It didn't help that the truck would be silent for hours on end, neither girl wanting to be the one to break it. Thank God for the radio. The few CDs she had in the truck had lost all of their charm within the same day of her putting them in, including even those mixes that she remembered carefully putting together with a small sense of excitement. She hated them now and had even taken an opportunity once to frisbee one out of the window while Max was sleeping. It felt like she was always sleeping. So far, their plan had been to stay in one spot for around 2 days, leaving on the third. It just seemed the best way to be safe. Chloe had quickly acclimated to being disenchanted with the whole process of traveling. Sometimes, when Max was awake during the drive, she'd catch her staring out the window or reading a passing billboard with more interest than Chloe could even pretend to muster. But that was its own kind of satisfaction. Max was routinely inhabited by a pressure around her, pulling her down into a state of despair. So even if it wasn't a smile, seeing her admire their surroundings was more than enough to keep the flame from going out. As if something as small as a sneeze from the brunette was a relief, causing her to think, there you are. You're still with me. Her head jerked up, her eyes widening for a split second as she realized she was dozing off. This had grown to become the sign that they needed to stop and find the nearest place to stay. Typically, this was the first sketchy motel they happened across. She cracked the window and let the December air slide through, the chill of it waking her up enough to finish the drive. Once already they had to stay the night on the side of the road, sleeping uncomfortably in the truck. It wouldn't have been so bad if they both didn't wake up shivering, nearly frozen from the snow-laden countryside. That was all it took for her to know she had to push herself at least enough to find some place with heat. After 20 minutes more, they pulled into the parking lot of a motel. She sighed, letting her head rest against the window. Safe and sound, or at least something close to that. She looked at Max, the girl slumped against the seat in a deep sleep. It frustrated her. If she was awake, Chloe wouldn't have to be alone with her thoughts. It wasn't fair to leave her all alone, stewing in the knowledge that many people were dead because of her. All because the sleeping, small girl next to her thought she deserved life more than anyone else in Arcadia Bay. Consequently, more than anyone else in the other 2 towns as well. This poor, slumbering girl that had to make a heartbreaking choice who, in the end, chose her. But could barely talk to her. Could barely look her in the eye. Not that she was any better. On those rare occasions where Max actually attempted conversation, Chloe often let her words flounder awkwardly as she gave short, cold replies. Why did she do that? Every single time, she immediately regretted it. It made her angry. It made her sad. Sometimes it just made her laugh from the sheer absurdity of it. There she was, a working pulse and breath in her lungs at a tremendous and terrible cost. It had to mean something, right? What the fuck is in your head? She whispered, staring at Max. She didn't know why the lack of reply ate at her so much. Like she expected Max to spring into consciousness with a concise explanation. It made her feel lost. She acknowledged the uncomfortable feeling growing in her stomach and cleared her throat, staving off the impulse to get choked up. What are we? The question was clawing and desperate. And as much as her heart was contorted by 1,000 feelings, many of which were based around different shades of anger, she couldn't find it in herself to feel them genuinely at the girl next to her. More than anything, she was stricken with the cloying and overbearing feeling to protect her. Like it was her turn to keep her safe now. She hadn't even realized it, but despite all the negativity in her head, she was actually smiling as she watched her. She reached across the seat and, very gently, brushed the hair out of Max's face. "Hey, I need a room," Chloe said to the scraggly-looking man behind the counter. She was becoming very personally familiar with the graveyard shift workers of the world. Yeah, sure," he said back as if he himself had recently awakened. "One bed or two?" Chloe stared at him, turning the question over in her mind. There seemed to be a 50-50 shot that she would spend the night in Max's bed trying to soothe the girl's nightmares. Being a twin bed, they were always forced close together. She didn't mind being so close to Max, but it was uncomfortable. She figured maybe she should just cut out the middleman and get one big bed for them. It would make sense. It wouldn't have to mean anything. "Doesn't matter," she replied, clamping her eyes shut at the uncertainty in her answer. "Cool," he said and lazily turned to retrieve a key that was hanging on a hook. She dug her wallet out of her pocket and opened it, grimacing at the sizable wad of $20 bills. Max had learned that she could withdraw from her bank account over and over so long as she used the rewind and get as much money as they needed. Chloe didn't like it. A part of her knew it was something Max, under normal circumstances, would hate doing. But once the brunette had figured it out, she did it without a hint of hesitation. Because they weren't just fucking around with an endless stream of money for fun. They were surviving. Morals could be bent. Once she had paid for that night, she returned to the truck where Max still remained asleep. She opened the passenger door and leaned across the girl, pressing her thumb on the switch to the seatbelt lock and carefully working the strap over Max's body. She reached for her shoulder and paused. Who would wake up? Someone scared. Someone lost in guilt and sadness. She hoped it might be the girl who laughed with her a few weeks ago before everything went sideways. Was that girl even still in there? She exhaled through her nose and nudged Max's shoulder. "We had to stop," she said quietly. "Gotta get you inside to sleep, okay?" Max opened her eyes slowly, regarded Chloe for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, come on," she said, reaching her arms under Max to help her out of the truck. Once she was on her feet, Chloe grabbed her by the hand and led her to the room that coincided with the number on the keychain. As she slid the key into the lock, she found herself especially curious about what sort of bed awaited her on the other side of the door. She also found herself grateful when she saw it was a queen-sized bed. "Big bed," Max said sleepily as she stumbled toward it. "Is that okay?" Chloe asked, shutting the door, locking it and sliding the door chain into place. "Yeah, why wouldn't it be?" Max flopped onto the bed, her arms out wide. Chloe rounded to the other side and sat down. She ran her hand over the pillowy comforter. "I don't know," she said with a small shrug. "Maybe you're picky." Max snorted quietly. "I'm not picky," she protested. She tilted her head back all the way so she could see Chloe. "Where are we?" "Bumblefuck," the girl replied. That made Max laugh. "So, same place as yesterday," she said, smiling. The elusive Max Caulfield smile. It seemed like she always reserved it for the night, just before they both collapsed from exhaustion. She tried not to make a big deal of it, but Chloe did everything she could to savor the mood. To capitalize on it. "No, not the same place," Chloe said. "This bumblefuck actually has a working ice machine." Max faked a gasp. "Living the high life," she giggled. They maintained this fragile banter for a little while before they unanimously, but silently, agreed that it was time to try to sleep. Chloe climbed under the blankets and settled in, lying flat on her back. She stared up at the ceiling, barely visible in the soft glow of the moonlight. "I'm here if you have a nightmare," she said. She tried to situate her arm more comfortably and grazed against Max's. She hadn't meant it as any particular sort of gesture, but couldn't find it in her to complain when the brunette grasped her hand. "Thank you," Max said and carefully allowed her fingers to lace between Chloe's. She didn't respond. She just focused on the feeling of their hands together. They stayed like that until she thought Max had fallen asleep. "I'm cold," the girl said suddenly, letting the words crash through the silence. Without thinking about it, Chloe turned onto her side and scooted closer, wrapping an arm around Max. "Better?" she asked. The brunette replied. There was a breathy hesitation. "You're always so warm. Feel free to use me as your incredible human heating pad anytime," Chloe said, chuckling. "Noted," Max said. There was a brief pause. "I've been cold a lot lately." And Chloe wanted to say something back, maybe another joke or something comforting. Or maybe how much she needed to feel Max just as badly as the girl needed her. That it helped her too. But all she could think about was how in the morning this Max would be gone, replaced with the guarded, silent one. So she remained quiet, holding Max until she drifted to sleep with only one thought running through her head. "Our relationship is fucking nocturnal."